The line was out the door again. I don't mean that the way you'd mean it on Earth. A queue at the post office, maybe 20 people, someone sighing about the wait. I mean 240 displaced persons standing shoulder to shoulder in a converted grain exchange hall on Verith Settlement, which until 14 months ago had been a nothing town. 4,100 permanent residents, one school, a machine shop, a bar called The Resin that served 3 drinks, all of them bad. Then the cascade hit. 40 worlds. Fort Felty Belk worlds, the jewels of the Accord, the ones with the tiered cities and the atmospheric art and the shipyards that could build a frigate from raw ore in 19 days, went dark in a chain that took 11 weeks. Stellar instability, orbital decay, atmosphere collapse. The technical language didn't matter. What mattered was that 86 million Velketh subjects suddenly had nowhere to go, and human settlements, small, crude, geologically stable human settlements like Verith, were the only ground still holding. I processed intake forms. That was my job. I'd done it before the cascade, too. Residency permits for off-world workers, equipment import filings, the kind of paperwork that makes you forget you're on a planet at all. Now, I did the same forms for people who'd lost everything, and the only difference was the volume. My booth was third from the left. Plastic chair, laminate desk, a terminal that crashed twice a day. I had a mug of cold coffee and a stack of pre-printed intake sheets for when the terminal went down, which it always did. She came to the window at 1440. I know because I'd just logged a timestamp. No entourage, no escort. She wore a gray utility wrap, the kind we distributed at the first stage processing tent outside. Standard issue, shapeless. Her hair was dark, almost blue-black, cropped close to the jaw in a way that looked deliberate, not refugee desperate. Her skin was a deep, warm brown, with a copper undertone that caught the overhead strip light. Her eyes were pale, an amber green that didn't seem to match the rest of her, like someone had set 2 pieces of sea glass into a face that was otherwise all earth tones. She sat down across from me and placed both hands flat on the desk. Her fingernails were clean. That sounds like a strange thing to notice. But after 14 months of processing people who'd been through transit camps and cargo holds and emergency shelters, clean fingernails stood out. It meant someone who hadn't stopped caring. Name, I said. Calith Vor. I typed it. The terminal didn't crash. Small mercy. World of origin. Sorvithi Prime. I'd processed maybe 600 people from Sorvithi. It had been a capital world, the administrative seat of the inner cluster. One of the first to go dark. Status. She paused. Not long. Just a breath's worth. Displaced. No status. I typed it. The form had a field for prior title or rank. It was an old Accord residency form, designed for workers and diplomats, and nobody had bothered to redesign it for the cascade. Most people left it blank. Some people said none and looked at the desk when they said it. Prior title or rank, I read. None. I looked at her. She looked at the wall behind me. There's a thing that happens when you process enough people. You start to see the ones who are lying, not about dangerous things, not about criminal records or contraband, but about themselves, about who they used to be. They sit too straight. They answer too quickly. They've rehearsed the smallness, the way someone rehearses a line in a language they don't speak natively. She sat too straight. I didn't push it. I finished the form. Housing assignment, dietary requirements, medical flag, none declared, language preference, emergency contact, none. I printed the temporary residency chit and slid it across the desk. Processing Wing B, Corridor 12. Housing block is on the east side. Meal service is in the main hall at 07-12-18. Thank you. She picked up the chit. Her fingers didn't shake. She stood, and she walked toward the door, and I watched her go, and then I did the thing I wasn't supposed to do. I ran her biometrics. The intake form required a thumbprint and a retinal, standard identity lock, nothing invasive. The system logged them against the old Accord population registry, the one that hadn't been updated since the Cascade, because there was no one left to update it. I'd never bothered checking before. The registry was a ghost database. It told you who someone used to be on a world that no longer existed, and what good was that? The match came back in 4 seconds. Calith Vor, House Vorsethi, Queen Designate of the Inner Cluster, Sovereign of Sorvathi, Sorvathi Lesser, and the Athel Reach. 41 worlds under direct governance. Status: title wrote by House Klaja Conclave 14 months prior. Reason: governance failure voted 32-4. I read it twice. Then I read the conclave record beneath it. The vote had happened 8 days after the Cascade began, 8 days into the worst. Stellar disaster in recorded Accord history, and her own court had stripped her title. Not because she'd caused the collapse. Because she hadn't prevented it. Because the Cascade had started in her sector under her governance, and the conclave needed someone to carry it. 32-4. 28 of those 32 were now in human refugee settlements. Some of them were probably in my processing queue. I sat there for a while. The line moved. My colleague Den, in the booth to my left, called the next person forward. The hall smelled like recycled air and the chemical tang of the settlement's water treatment system, and outside the windows the Verath sky was the same flat gray it always was. I pulled up her intake form. The field read, prior title or rank, none. I deleted it. I typed, prior title or rank, Queen Designate, House Vorsethi. Inner Cluster Sovereign, governance suspended by conclave vote, title not legally dissolved. Under Accord Founding Charter, Article 114.7, sovereign title persists until formal dissolution ratified by 2/3 of surviving constituent, worlds, quorum not met. It was true. I'd read the charter once, back when my job was boring enough that I'd read anything, and Article 114.7 was clear. A conclave vote could suspend governance powers, but the title itself required a dissolution quorum of the constituent worlds. And you couldn't hold a quorum if the worlds didn't exist anymore. Which meant the vote had suspended her authority, but her title. The legal, registered, Accord-recognized title was technically still hers. Nobody had checked. Nobody had cared enough to check. I saved the form. I printed a corrected residency chit, and then I did something I'd never done in 14 months of intake processing. I left my booth. Den looked up. Where are you going? Corridor 12. I found her in Housing Block East 9. It was a converted storage unit, foam sleeping pad, a shelf, a curtain for a door. She was sitting on the edge of the pad with the gray utility wrap folded neatly beside her, wearing the clothes she'd arrived in. Dark trousers, a plain long-sleeved shirt, boots that had been good once. She was holding a cup of water from the corridor dispenser and looking at nothing. Calith Vor, I said. She looked up. Your intake form had an error. I corrected it. I held out the new chit. She took it. She read it. I watched her read it. Watched her eyes track across the small printed text. Watched them stop. Watched them go back to the beginning and read it again. She didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. There was no dramatic moment, no collapse, no trembling hands. What happened was smaller and, I think, harder. Her shoulders settled, not dropped, settled. Like something that had been braced for 14 months, finally remembered it was allowed to rest. This is not accurate, she said quietly. The conclave revoked. The conclave suspended your governance powers. They didn't dissolve your title. They can't, under Article 114.7. Not without a constituent world quorum, and there aren't enough worlds left to hold one. I paused. I checked. She looked at the chit again. You checked, she repeated. It's my job to file the forms correctly. There was a silence. Not uncomfortable, just full. The corridor outside was busy. People passing, children's voices, the hum of the settlement's air cyclers, and inside the little storage unit room, it was very still. They blamed me, she said, my own court. 8 days after the stars shifted and the cascade began, they voted, and then they left, and I was the last one on Sorvethi when the evacuation order came. She looked at the cup of water in her other hand. I don't think they expected me to survive the transit. You survived. I survived. A pause, and I arrived here, and no one has called me by my title in 14 months. Not once, not even the ones who voted. They see me in the meal hall and they look away. I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't a diplomat. I wasn't a counselor. I was a clerk in a settlement that used to process equipment import forms. The chit is corrected, I said. It's in the system now. Any accord filing that references your identity will pull the full title. Housing, medical, meal registry, all of it. Why? She asked. And I thought about it. I thought about the right answer, the noble answer. The one where I said something about justice, about recognition, about the obligations of one civilization to another. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was simpler. Because it's your name, I said, and the form asks for your name. I file what's accurate. She set the cup of water on the shelf. She folded the chit once, carefully, along the center line and placed it beside the cup. Then she looked at me, not through me, not past me, not at the wall behind me, at me. And I understood in that look what the word sovereign actually meant. It wasn't a title. It wasn't governance powers or constituent worlds or conclave votes. It was the capacity to see another person fully, to look at them and know exactly what they'd done and what it cost, and to let them know they'd been seen. Orenthal, she said. She'd read my name off the chit, the intake clerk's signature line at the bottom, the one nobody ever looks at. Thank you for filing the form correctly. I nodded. I went back to my booth. The line was still out the door. Den had covered my queue and was irritated about it. I sat down, pulled up the next intake sheet, and called the next person forward. Outside, the Verith sky was still flat and grey. 41 worlds had gone dark, and 86 million people were learning to live in towns they'd never heard of, eating food they didn't recognize, sleeping in rooms that used to hold grain. And in Housing Block East 9, one corrected form sat folded beside a cup of water, and the name on it was accurate, and that was the only thing I'd done that day that mattered.